Hi, I'm Alice Wenzel with the Becker County Master Gardeners. Today I'm going to talk to you about creating a shade garden. This shade garden I created about 3 years ago when we built our shop. The first thing you have to do when you create a shade garden is, of course, get rid of the weeds and the grass. In doing this, you need to use a small trowel or shovel to work out the seeds or the weeds and the lawn that's in the area. Because there's so many tree roots down here, you don't want to take in a rototiller or use real huge shovels because you don't want to damage the tree roots. The tree roots have large roots and they also have feeder roots under there. And so you just want to get rid of the weeds that's in the area and try and keep the roots of the trees free from damage. Otherwise you might harm the tree or even possibly kill it. The next thing you have to do is amend the soil. In my case, I brought in some compost and I used a garden trowel and worked it into just the areas where I knew I was going to plant the perennials at that time. The next thing you have to do when creating your shade garden is consider how much sun it's going to get. Sometimes in the early morning or late afternoon, the sun will shine in certain areas, and when that happens, you'll be able to use a more variety of plants in your shade garden than just if it's a total shade. In my garden here, it was mostly shade, so I had to stick with the shade-loving plants. And of course, hostas are beautiful shade plants. They come in different varieties, different colors, different sizes. And my favorite shade plant is the lungwort. The lungworts bloom early in the spring, and they have the colorful leaves all year round. There's a leaf that's darker green with spots, and there's one over there that is a little bit lighter green with speckles, and one over there that's almost white leaves. So I kind of like those. They give color all year round, yet you do get a bloom in the springtime, and they add interest to your shade garden. Also, there's bergenias, there's ferns, ground covers. There's just a lot of different plants to choose from when you create your shade garden. One thing is that you can, if you want to exchange hostas with neighbors, sometimes after a few years the hostas can be split, and then you can get free hostas that way. It always helps. Another thing when you're creating your shade garden, you have to consider water and nutrients. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of tree roots underneath the ground, and they're going to be competing for all the water and all the nutrients they can get. So in the springtime, I try and incorporate some compost around each perennial to give it an extra boost for this year, and maybe even give it a little all-purpose garden fertilizer so that it can keep healthy and strong. And with the water, since I have mature trees here, the leaves act as an umbrella almost and sometimes shed the water away from the perennials. So I always have to check the soil to make sure it's not too dried out, and then supplement the watering. This is an area where I have perennials. It's a partial shade garden. It does get early morning sun, but the overhang protects it the rest of the day. And just to give you an idea of how you can incorporate annuals into your shade garden, I've planted impatiens in between the perennials, and it really brightens up the area and adds color all season long, since perennials usually only bloom once during the season. Since this is partial shade, I'm able to use different kinds of plants along with the hostas. As you can see, the flowers are kind of coming to the end of the season. It is fall, and they've bloomed. The perennials have bloomed already this year. Some of the hostas that you'll see have round little holes in them, and those are from slugs that come in the summertime. And since we had a really wet year, there's a lot more of them. So quite a few of my hostas have the little holes in the leaves, and it is because of the slug problem that we have had during the wet summer months. Just to give you an idea on using shade in different ways, here is a shade bed that we used impatiens, and they're an annual flower. What we did here is we just brought some old trees that had fallen down in the woods and stacked them up place to put in some compost and soil and planted our impatiens. It's a good divider between the lawn and the woods. And on this bed is a perfect example where you can see where it gets just a little bit of sun and part of the plants don't get any sun. That's totally shaded. Where the sun can do a lot for plants, and it's always nice if you could just get a little bit of partial sun on even if it is a shade garden. This is the front of my house. It faces north, and so it gets just a little bit of sun in late afternoon. Here again I use annual impatiens to add color to this part of the house. And I also wanted to mention that begonias in the hanging baskets. Begonias come in many varieties and colors. These happen to be trailing begonias, and they certainly add a lot of spark and color to a dark area. The University of Minnesota has a wonderful fact sheet called Shade Gardening, and in that it tells you how you can start a shade garden and lists a lot of plants that you can use in your garden. Thanks for joining me and the Master Gardener's Rambling Rose.